You know what I was thinking? So one of the things I remember probably, I don't know if it was 10 or 15 podcasts deep into this podcast. I remember saying during one of the podcasts, and I've said it a few times along the way, I remember saying that these people that I'm talking about in these books, they're not characters.
Yeah.
These are people. And I think at some point for me, that transition in my brain happened where I was saying to myself, these are people. And I think I got a little bit of it in my platoon commander tour because, you know, it was a good solid deployment. Was there risk? Sure, there was risk. It wasn't super high risk. I had a great crew of guys, but you know, there was stress and there was personalities, and you start to see that when you read about a guy and you think, I kind of know that guy. I just know him a little bit. And you start to realize that those people in these books, they're real people. And I think that for me was a huge leap between connecting me to the text that I was reading. And I'll tell you another thing, and straight up, voice. When I started thinking about reading these things, when I started reading these aloud, when I started reading them and hearing them in my own headset, like on the podcast, that was an impact. And now it's happened. It happened with Bill Reeder. It happened with Jody Middick. It happened when these guys come on here and they hear me read what they wrote. And it hits them. And so that's another part of it too. There's an element when you read that's missing. There's an element of voice that is just more powerful. It's just more powerful. And I remember when I read The Forgotten Highlander, when I read that book, I read it on the plane, coming back, Colin, a guy over in Scotland, a buddy of mine who I'd done some work with, he gave me this book, and I was on podcast 11, and he goes, hey, you got to check out this book. I won't try and do his Scottish accent. Plus, he's a mumbler. He's like, hey, you got to check out this book, mate. And so he gives me this book, and I'm sort of thinking, oh, okay, you know, I wasn't sure, but I had made enough of a leap in my brain that when I started reading that book, I said to myself, wow, this is gonna be a really powerful podcast. So I read the book. So then when we come, this is podcast number 12. When I came in to record it, I thought, yeah, this is gonna be really heavy. But when I read it, it was like I was getting hit in the head with a sledgehammer. And that's the first podcast that when I got to the end of the book, I actually didn't know what to say. Because what do you say? What do you say about a guy that put maggots on his flesh to eat away the dead flesh? What do you say about that? What do you say about that? And so that's the first podcast where I said, when I got done with it, the next time I did a podcast that was heavy like that, I knew that I had to get myself somewhere to go. I had to give myself some thought about how am I going to make this, how does this become something, how do I get out of this hole? Because that's what you're doing. And so there's a level of that as well when you hear a hardcore history podcast, great storytelling, but he's reading quotes from people, but it's so much more powerful when you hear it audibly. And people say that about Extreme Ownership too. People say, oh yeah, I love that book. And then someone will say, you got to get the audio book because it's Leif and I reading it. And you can hear, how much is communicated in the tone of voice? There's a lot.